I am Stephanie Miller, 31 years old, and I never thought my obsession with legal documentation would save my career. As a senior software engineer at TechFusion, I had always buried protective clauses in my code. Call it paranoia, call it foresight. When our new VP Nathan started systematically dismantling my project, I knew my insurance policy would activate. What he saw as a disposable developer, I saw as his downfall. I had prepared for this moment, and now it was time to execute my countermeasure. If you are watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you are tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself in the tech world. I graduated with a degree in computer science from Stanford 8 years ago and immediately landed a position at TechFusion. Back then, I was just an eager junior developer with big dreams and bigger student loans. I worked my way up from debugging other people's code to leading my own projects, eventually earning the title of senior engineer through countless late nights and innovative solutions. My latest project was my proudest achievement, an artificial intelligence-powered predictive maintenance system. This was not just another monitoring tool. My system could analyze patterns and predict equipment failures before they happened, potentially saving our clients millions of dollars in downtime and repairs. The algorithm I had developed was revolutionary, identifying subtle correlations that even experienced maintenance technicians might miss. At TechFusion, I had built a supportive team around me. Jessica Parker was my closest friend and colleague, a brilliant data scientist who could make sense of the most chaotic information sets. Marcus Davis, a veteran programmer nearing retirement, had been my mentor since my first day. I was also mentoring Diana Thompson, a promising junior developer with a knack for user interface design that complemented my back-end focus perfectly. Before Nathan Williams arrived, TechFusion had a culture that nurtured innovation. Our previous VP of Product Development, Eleanor Hughes, believed in giving engineers room to experiment and learn from failures. We worked collaboratively, sharing knowledge across teams and celebrating each other's successes. Our weekly demo days were legendary, with engineers from all departments gathering to see new features and provide constructive feedback in a supportive environment. TechFusion itself was a mid-sized tech company with about 300 employees specializing in enterprise software solutions. We were not as flashy as the Silicon Valley giants, but we had a solid reputation for reliability and excellent customer service. Our clients included manufacturing companies, healthcare systems, and financial institutions that depended on our software for their daily operations. Over the years, I had built a reputation in the industry as someone who delivered complex projects on time and under budget. I spoke at several conferences about my approach to system architecture and had been featured in Tech Innovator magazine. Secretly, I had been nurturing dreams of launching my own startup someday. I had ideas sketched out in notebooks and prototype code stored on my personal server at home. What set me apart from many other developers was my meticulous approach to documentation and legal considerations. While most of my colleagues saw legal disclaimers and licensing agreements as boring afterthoughts, I had developed a deep interest in intellectual property law as it applied to software. I religiously documented every aspect of my code, including dependencies, licenses, and terms of use. This attention to detail had earned me the respect of our legal department, especially Allison Bennett, our lead counsel. Allison and I had formed an unlikely friendship after I approached her with questions about open-source licensing for a project. Unlike most engineers who avoided the legal department, I sought her advice regularly. She appreciated that I took the time to understand the legal implications of my work, and I appreciated her straightforward explanations of complex legal concepts. We often met for lunch, discussing the intersection of technology and law over sushi or salads. Little did I know how crucial this friendship would become when Nathan Williams entered our world. The arrival of Nathan Williams was announced via company-wide email on a Monday morning. The message from our CEO described him as a strategic hire with a Harvard MBA and an impressive track record of optimizing operations at DirectTech, one of our competitors. The email emphasized his expertise in streamlining processes and maximizing shareholder value. Already those corporate buzzwords set off warning bells in my mind. Nathan made his grand entrance at an all-hands meeting the following week. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that seemed excessive for our business-casual environment, he stood at the podium with the confidence of someone who was accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. I am excited to join the Tech Fusion family, he began, though his expression showed no excitement whatsoever. After reviewing the current state of our product lineup, I see tremendous opportunities for streamlining our operations and focusing on core competencies. Some tough decisions will need to be made, but I am confident that these changes will position us for unprecedented growth. As he continued talking about synergies and market penetration, I exchanged glances with Jessica, who subtly rolled her eyes. We had heard this kind of corporate speak before, and it usually preceded budget cuts and project cancellations. The changes began gradually. First, Nathan eliminated the weekly catered lunches, citing unnecessary expenditure. Then he canceled our annual team-building retreat, replacing it with a 4-hour workshop in the office conference room. Next came stricter reporting requirements, detailed daily progress reports, bi-weekly code reviews, and justification forms for any resource requests. In meetings, I quickly noticed how Nathan would interrupt my presentations with questions that seemed designed to undermine my authority. Is that really the most efficient approach? Or, have you considered the cost implications of this implementation? When male colleagues presented similar ideas, his response was notably more receptive. What really concerned me was Nathan's growing relationship with Brian Thompson, a mid-level developer whose technical skills were mediocre at best. Brian had joined Tech Fusion about a year earlier and had produced nothing remarkable, but he excelled at office politics. He laughed the loudest at Nathan's jokes, stayed late when Nathan was working, and somehow always managed to position himself next to the VP at company events. With my intuition screaming danger, I began documenting everything. I saved emails, recorded meeting notes, and kept a detailed log of all interactions with Nathan. I also backed up all my code and documentation to secure locations, ensuring I had proof of my contributions to the project. The first major confrontation came during a quarterly review meeting with the executive team. I was presenting the progress on my predictive maintenance system when Nathan interrupted. "This all sounds very innovative, Stephanie," he said, his tone making the compliment sound like an insult. "But I am concerned about the return on investment. Can you justify the resources you are consuming relative to the projected revenue?" Fortunately, I had anticipated this question. I smoothly transitioned to a slide showing detailed financial projections, implementation costs versus maintenance savings for our target clients, projected subscription revenue, and competitive analysis showing our advantage over similar products on the market. As you can see, I concluded the conservative estimate shows break-even in 14 months, with a projected 22% annual return thereafter. The aggressive model, which assumes faster market adoption based on our existing client relationships, shows break-even in just 9 months. Nathan looked momentarily taken aback. He clearly had not expected such a thorough response. The CFO nodded approvingly at my numbers and the meeting continued. Later that day, Nathan called me into his office. The friendly facade he maintained in front of executives was gone. "Listen, Stephanie," he said, leaning forward across his desk. "You need to understand how things work now. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I need team players, not people who try to show me up in meetings." "I was just answering your question with the relevant data," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my rising anger. "Just be careful about the battles you choose," he said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Technical skills are important, but so is being a good cultural fit." That evening, I met Jessica and Allison for drinks at a bar near our office. After swearing them to secrecy, I shared my concerns about Nathan. "He is systematically changing the company culture," I explained, "and I think my project is on his chopping block despite the numbers showing its value." Jessica agreed, adding that her team had also felt the pressure. "He rejected our request for additional data storage without even reviewing the justification," she said. "It is like he has already decided which projects will survive regardless of their merit." Allison listened carefully, then shared something that chilled me. "I probably should not tell you this, but DirectTech, where Nathan came from, has had several lawsuits from former employees. Nothing that went to court, all settled with non-disclosure agreements, but the rumors in legal circles suggest patterns of discrimination and intellectual property disputes." "Great," I said, taking a long sip of my wine. "So we have a potential lawsuit generator running our product department." "Just watch your back," Allison advised, "and keep documenting everything." I had no idea how prophetic her words would prove to be. Over the next few weeks, Nathan began systematically isolating me within the company. Diana, the junior developer I had been mentoring, was reassigned to a different project under Brian's supervision. When I asked about it, Nathan explained it as cross-training for her professional development. My requests for additional testing resources were repeatedly denied or indefinitely delayed. Most alarmingly, I started receiving calendar invitations for important meetings only to have them canceled at the last minute with vague explanations about streamlining the attendee list. Meanwhile, decisions that directly affected my project were being made without my input. The situation reached a new low during a client presentation where Brian presented a feature concept that was unmistakably based on an idea I had outlined in an internal document months earlier. As he described his innovative approach to data visualization, he avoided eye contact with me. Nathan nodded approvingly throughout the presentation and publicly commended Brian's creative thinking. When I returned to my desk afterward, Jessica stopped by with a concerned expression. "Did you see that Jacobson Manufacturing is listed as a partner on the Q3 roadmap?" she asked quietly. "No," I replied. "They are one of our biggest prospective clients for the predictive maintenance system. Why would they be on the general roadmap?" "I overheard Nathan on a call yesterday," she continued, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "He was discussing implementation timelines with them for something that sounded very similar to your project." That evening, I stayed late and used my administrative access to check Nathan's calendar. What I found confirmed my suspicions. He had been having private meetings with representatives from Jacobson Manufacturing for weeks, meetings that I should have been included in as the technical lead for the product. They were interested in. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Nathan to discuss the situation. His assistant scheduled me for a 15-minute slot late in the afternoon. "I understand you have been meeting with Jacobson about the predictive maintenance system," I said, as soon as I sat down in his office. Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying me with cold eyes. "I meet with many clients about many products, Stephanie. Jacobson is the primary target client for my project, and I am the technical lead. I should be involved in those discussions." He sighed as if dealing with a petulant child. "This is exactly the problem. You say my project instead of our product. You are too emotionally invested, which clouds your business judgment. My technical expertise is essential to setting proper expectations with clients," I insisted. "We have that covered," he replied dismissively. "Brian has been getting up to speed on the architecture and can handle the technical discussions." I felt my blood pressure rising but maintained a professional demeanor. Brian does not have the depth of knowledge about the algorithm that I developed. The key word there is developed past tense. The core architecture is already documented. Now we need someone with a more collaborative approach to shepherd it through to market. The implication was clear: my role was being diminished, and Brian was being positioned to take over. I left the meeting feeling a mix of anger and anxiety that made it difficult to focus on my work for the remainder of the day. That night, I barely slept, running through worst-case scenarios in my mind. What if Nathan completely removed me from the project? What if they took my code and gave someone else credit for my years of work? The thought made me physically ill. The next day, through careful questioning of a friend in the finance department, I discovered something even more disturbing. Nathan had initiated discussions about outsourcing part of our development work to a company called Techno Solutions. A quick LinkedIn search revealed that Techno Solutions was founded by Patrick Reynolds, who had worked with Nathan at Direct Tech. The connection was too convenient to be coincidental. Desperate for advice, I met with Marcus, my mentor, at a coffee shop away from the office. "I do not know what to do," I admitted after explaining the situation. "It feels like Nathan is systematically pushing me out while setting up to take credit for my work." Marcus sighed heavily, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening with concern. "Politics like this are why I have stayed in technical roles and avoided management. The best advice I can give you is to protect your work and build a record of your contributions." "I have been documenting everything," I assured him. "Good. But also be prepared for the possibility that you might need to look for opportunities elsewhere. The direction of a company can change quickly when new leadership arrives." Though not the answer I had hoped for, Marcus's pragmatic advice helped me focus. If I could not prevent Nathan from sidelining me, I could at least ensure that my intellectual contributions were properly protected and attributed. I began working late into the night not just on the project itself but on fortifying its legal protections. I meticulously reviewed every line of code I had written, ensuring comprehensive documentation that clearly established my authorship. I added detailed comments explaining the logic behind complex algorithms and created architectural diagrams showing how the various components interacted. Most importantly, I crafted a special license agreement and embedded it within the codebase. This was not a standard open-source license or generic terms of use. I spent hours researching intellectual property law as it applied to software and consulting references I had collected from my conversations with Allison. The resulting clause specified that any derivative work or repurposing of the code required explicit consent from the original author, namely me. It included provisions about proper attribution and restrictions on transferring the code to third parties without appropriate agreements in place. To ensure this clause was properly filed, I scheduled a meeting with Allison to review the documentation. "This is impressively thorough," she said, as she read through the license agreement. "Most engineers can barely be bothered to add basic header comments, let alone something this comprehensive." "I want to make sure everything is properly protected," I explained. "Given the situation with Nathan, I am concerned about how my work might be used or represented." Allison nodded thoughtfully. "This is legally sound. By filing this with the legal department and including it in the official documentation, you are creating a clear record of ownership and terms of use. It would be difficult for anyone to claim they were unaware of these provisions." "That is exactly what I want," I said, feeling a small sense of relief for the first time in weeks. Little did Nathan know that his dismissive attitude toward legal documentation would become his undoing. While he was busy playing corporate politics, I was quietly laying the groundwork for my protection, one carefully worded clause at a time. 3 days later, I received a calendar invitation for a department meeting with the ominous title, Project Portfolio Realignment. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. the following day, with the entire product development team required to attend. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities. I arrived at the office early the next morning, wearing my most professional outfit and armed with my laptop containing all my documentation. At precisely 10 a.m., Nathan strode into the conference room, followed by Brian and 2 analysts from the finance department. Nathan remained standing at the head of the table, projecting an image of authority. "Thank you all for coming," he began, though attendance had been mandatory. "As part of our ongoing efforts to optimize our product portfolio and maximize return on investment, we have conducted a thorough review of all current development initiatives." He clicked to a slide showing a quadrant chart with various projects positioned according to their supposed cost versus benefit. My predictive maintenance system was in the high-cost, questionable benefit quadrant, a categorization that was completely at odds with the financial projections I had presented. Based on this analysis, Nathan continued, "We will be discontinuing the following projects effective immediately." He read from a list, and my project was the second one named. "Team members from these projects will be reassigned to our core focus areas which have demonstrated stronger market potential." I felt as though I had been punched in the stomach, but I maintained my composure, aware of the eyes of my colleagues on me. Nathan was not finished. "Additionally, I am pleased to announce that Brian will be leading a new initiative focused on operational intelligence solutions for our manufacturing clients." He clicked to the next slide, which showed a system architecture diagram that was unmistakably based on my work, though with superficial changes to the visual design. As the meeting continued with Nathan outlining the transition plan, I noticed Jessica looking at me with concern. Marcus's face was a mask of barely contained anger. Diana, my former mentee, stared down at her notebook, avoiding eye contact. After Nathan finished his presentation, he asked if there were any questions. The room was silent, heavy with shock and discomfort. "Excellent," he said, mistaking stunned silence for acceptance. "I will be meeting individually with affected team leads this afternoon to discuss reassignments. Stephanie, let us talk at 2 p.m. As people filed out of the conference room, Nathan approached me with what he probably thought was a sympathetic expression. "This is a learning opportunity," he said, in a low voice, his tone condescending. "Not every project succeeds, but the experience you have gained will be valuable in your new role." I nodded without speaking, not trusting myself to respond professionally. As soon as Nathan left, I hurried to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and finally allowed the tears of frustration to come. After a few minutes, I heard the door open. Stephanie, are you in here? It was Jessica's voice filled with concern. I opened the stall door quickly, wiping my eyes. I am fine. No, you are not, and you should not be, Jessica said firmly. What Nathan is doing is wrong on so many levels. Did you see that architecture diagram? I asked. That was my work just repackaged. Everyone who has been paying attention knows that, Jessica assured me. But there is more. I overheard Nathan telling Brian that they are presenting the rebranded version of your system to Jacobson Manufacturing next week. They are rushing to close a 7-figure deal using your technology. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. Nathan was not just canceling my project, he was stealing it, rebranding it, and planning to take credit for the sale. And in his arrogance, he had no idea about the legal protection I had put in place. I need to talk to Allison, I said, my mind suddenly clear. Do you have a plan? Jessica asked. I do now, I replied, feeling a strange calm replace my earlier distress. Nathan thinks he is playing chess, but he does not even know what game we are really playing. I skipped lunch and went straight to Allison's office, relieved to find her available. I closed the door behind me and quickly explained the situation. So he is essentially taking your project, giving it a new name, and presenting it as a new initiative led by Brian. Allison asked, her legal mind cutting straight to the key facts. Exactly. And they are planning to sell it to Jacobson next week. Allison leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notepad. And all your code contains the licensing clause we reviewed. Yes, including the requirement for explicit consent from the original author for any derivative work. Has the code been altered? Based on the architecture diagram, I saw they have made cosmetic changes to the user interface, but the core algorithms and system design are unmistakably mine. Allison smiled slightly. Have you had your meeting with Nathan yet to discuss your reassignment? It is scheduled for 2 p.m. Go to that meeting. Be professional. Accept whatever reassignment he offers. Do not tip your hand. And then we prepare for the board meeting on Friday, where Nathan is scheduled to present the new product strategy to the executives and investors. I will be there as legal counsel as always. What should I do in the meantime? Prepare your evidence. I need documentation showing your authorship of the code, the licensing terms we filed, and any proof you have that the new project is derivative of your work. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. I will have it all ready. At 2 p.m., I sat across from Nathan in his office, playing the role of the defeated engineer, accepting her fate. He informed me that I would be reassigned to maintenance work on our legacy systems, an obvious demotion designed to make me quit. I thanked him for the opportunity, watching confusion flicker across his face at my lack of resistance. That evening, I worked late into the night, compiling a comprehensive document that traced the development of my project from initial concept through to the current implementation. I included code samples, design documents, meeting notes, and email exchanges that established my role as the creator and lead developer. I also highlighted key sections of the licensing agreement that would be violated by Nathan's planned actions. I saved the file with the innocuous name Undocumented Dependencies and sent myself a copy to ensure it would be in my email records. Then I went home and for the first time in weeks slept soundly, knowing that Nathan's downfall was already set in motion. Friday morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. The board meeting was scheduled for 11 a.m. in the main conference room. I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit that projected confidence and professionalism, then headed to the office early to prepare. At 10:45, I took a seat in the back of the conference room as various executives and board members filed in. Our CEO, Michael Reynolds, greeted each person warmly, while the CFO, Sarah Johnson, distributed printed copies of the financial reports. 3 key investors were present, including Victoria Andrews, a venture capitalist known for her no-nonsense approach to business. Nathan arrived last, immaculately dressed and carrying a leather portfolio. He nodded confidently to the executives and took his position at the front of the room. Brian sat nearby, looking nervous but excited to be included in such a high-level meeting. Allison entered quietly and took a seat near me, giving me a subtle nod to indicate that she was ready. I noticed she had her tablet and a manila folder with her. Michael called the meeting to order, and after brief updates from various departments, invited Nathan to present his product strategy. Thank you, Michael. Nathan began smoothly. I am excited to share our revised product roadmap, which represents a strategic realignment to maximize our market position and revenue potential. He launched into a polished presentation about streamlining the product portfolio and focusing on high-value opportunities. When he reached the section about the new operational intelligence solution for manufacturing clients, he called Brian forward to explain the technical aspects. Brian stood nervously, then began describing the system architecture using the diagram I had seen in the earlier meeting. As he spoke, I could see that he was struggling with some of the technical details, clearly not fully understanding the complex algorithms he was presenting as if they were his creation. This proprietary predictive analysis engine, Brian said, gesturing to a component that I had spent 18 months developing, represents a breakthrough in machine learning applications for industrial systems. Victoria Andrews interrupted with a question. This looks similar to the predictive maintenance project I heard about during my last visit. Is this an evolution of that work? Nathan stepped in smoothly. This solution incorporates some concepts from previous exploratory work, but Brian has taken a fundamentally different approach that offers superior performance and scalability. This blatant lie was my cue. I quietly opened my laptop and sent an email to Allison with the subject line, "Undocumented dependencies," in the file attached. I saw her tablet screen light up as the message arrived. Allison reviewed the document quickly, then stood and excused herself from the room. Nathan continued his presentation, now discussing the potential revenue from the Jacobson manufacturing deal. 3 minutes later, Allison returned with a single printed page. She walked directly to Nathan, and without interrupting his speech, slid the paper in front of him on the table. It was the key section of my licensing agreement with the critical clauses highlighted in yellow. Nathan glanced down at the document, continued speaking for a moment, then stopped abruptly as the implications registered. The color drained from his face as he read the highlighted text. He looked up at Allison, then at me sitting quietly in the back of the room. "Oh no," he whispered, the microphone on the table picking up his words. "Oh, you did not." The room fell silent as everyone sensed that something significant had just happened. "Is everything all right?" Nathan Michael asked, confusion evident in his voice. Nathan attempted to regain his composure. "Just a minor legal detail that needs clarification. We can address it offline." "Actually," Allison interjected professionally, "this matter directly impacts the presentation and proposed deal with Jacobson Manufacturing. As company counsel, I need to bring it to the board's attention immediately." Victoria Andrews leaned forward. "Please explain, Allison." Allison nodded and addressed the room. The operational intelligence solution being presented contains code and intellectual property that is governed by a specific licensing agreement filed with the legal department. This agreement requires explicit consent from the original author for any derivative work or repurposing. That consent has not been obtained. All eyes turned to Nathan, who was now visibly flustered. "This is a standard internal project. All work done by employees belongs to the company." "That is generally true." Allison agreed, but this particular codebase includes a specific rider that was properly filed and approved by legal. It does not prevent the company from using the code, but it does require appropriate attribution and consent for certain types of modifications and third-party transfers. "Who is the original author?" Sarah Johnson asked. "I am," I said, speaking up for the first time as I rose from my seat. "I developed the predictive maintenance system that forms the core of what is being presented today." Nathan's expression hardened. "Stephanie's project was terminated due to resource optimization. This is a new initiative." "May I?" I asked, gesturing toward the presentation screen. After a moment of hesitation, Michael nodded. I connected my laptop to the projector and opened a side-by-side comparison of my original system architecture and the one Nathan and Brian had presented. The similarities were unmistakable, with only superficial changes to component names and visual layout. "As you can see," I explained calmly, "the core algorithms, data flow, and system integration points are identical. This is not a new initiative, but a direct derivative of my work, which is subject to the licensing terms that Allison has mentioned." The room was silent as the executives processed this information. Brian looked pale while Nathan's face had flushed with anger. "This is absurd," Nathan finally sputtered. "She is just disgruntled because her project was cancelled." Victoria Andrews turned to Allison. "What are the legal implications here?" If we proceed with presenting or selling this system as currently constituted without proper attribution and consent, Allison replied, we would be in violation of our own legally filed documentation. This could expose the company to liability, especially if the system is sold to third parties like Jacobson Manufacturing. So you are saying this deal cannot proceed? Michael asked, concern evident in his voice. Not as currently structured, Allison confirmed. The appropriate legal protocols would need to be followed first. Nathan's attempt to discredit me backfired spectacularly. This is clearly an attempt by Stephanie to sabotage the company. She embedded this clause maliciously. The clause was reviewed and approved by legal, Allison countered. There was nothing secretive about it. It is standard practice for developers to include licensing terms, and these were filed through proper channels. Michael, looking increasingly troubled, addressed me directly. Stephanie, what is your position on this matter? I believe in this technology and its potential value to our clients, I said. I spent 2 years developing it. My concern is not with the company using my work, but with the misrepresentation of its origins and the attempt to transfer it to third parties without proper attribution or involvement of the original development team. Victoria Andrews, who had been watching the exchange intently, spoke up. I think we need to take a step back and understand exactly what has happened here. Nathan, did you review the legal documentation for this code before repurposing it? Nathan's silence was damning. I move that we suspend this presentation and convene an emergency executive session to review the situation, Victoria said firmly. And I believe Nathan should recuse himself until we have clarity. Michael nodded in agreement. Nathan, please wait in my office. Brian, you are excused. Everyone else except the board members, Sarah, Allison, and Stephanie, please give us the room. As the others filed out, Nathan shot me a venomous glare. But I could see the fear behind his anger. He knew he had made a catastrophic mistake, and his carefully constructed plan was crumbling before his eyes. Once the room had cleared, except for the designated individuals, Michael turned to me with a serious expression. Stephanie, I need you to explain exactly what happened from the beginning. For the next 20 minutes, I presented a clear factual account of the events since Nathan's arrival. I shared documentation of the original project goals and achievements, the sudden cancellation despite positive financial projections, and the reappearance of my work under a different name with Brian inexplicably listed as the lead. I was careful to stick to verifiable facts, avoiding speculation about Nathan's motivations. I explained how I had included the licensing clause as a standard practice to ensure proper attribution and maintain the integrity of the codebase, particularly given its complex nature. The clause does not prevent TechFusion from using or selling the technology, I clarified. It simply requires that the original development team be properly credited and consulted on significant modifications or third-party transfers. Victoria Andrews studied me with shrewd eyes. This seems like an unusually detailed licensing provision for an internal project. Were you anticipating this situation? I met her gaze directly. I believe in protecting intellectual property properly regardless of circumstances. But yes, I had concerns about how my work might be represented after several incidents where Nathan seemed to be sidelining me while elevating Brian, who had minimal involvement in the project's development. Allison then provided legal context, confirming that the clause was properly filed and within reasonable bounds for intellectual property protection. She also mentioned that she had taken the liberty of reviewing Nathan's email communications regarding the Jacobson deal. I found evidence that Nathan was planning to transfer substantially modified versions of the code to Techno Solutions for optimization, Allison reported. Techno Solutions is owned by Patrick Reynolds, who previously worked with Nathan at Direct Tech. This revelation caused a stir among the board members. Michael's expression darkened. Are you suggesting there was a plan to funnel our proprietary technology to an outside company with connections to Nathan? The emails indicate an unusual arrangement, Allison replied carefully. At minimum, it represents a conflict of interest that should have been disclosed. Sarah Johnson, the CFO, spoke up for the first time. I was never comfortable with the sudden cancellation of the predictive maintenance project. The financial projections showed significant potential, and we had already invested considerable resources in its development. After further discussion, Michael thanked me for my professionalism and asked me to wait outside while the board deliberated. I spent an anxious hour in a small conference room, alternating between reviewing documentation on my laptop and staring out the window at the city skyline. Finally, Allison came to escort me back to the boardroom. The atmosphere had changed. The tension was gone, replaced by a sense of resolution. Stephanie Michael, began the board, has made several decisions that I want to share with you. First, Nathan has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation into his actions regarding your project and the potential conflict of interest with Techno Solutions. I nodded, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the surge of vindication I felt. Second, we are reinstating the predictive maintenance system project effective immediately, with you as the technical lead and with increased resources to accelerate its completion. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful for this recognition of my work's value. Third, we would like you to work with Allison to revise the licensing terms to ensure they protect both your intellectual contribution and the company's ability to commercialize the technology appropriately. I would be happy to do that, I agreed. Victoria Andrews leaned forward. We value innovation at this company, Stephanie, and we value the people who create it. What happened here represents a failure of leadership, not a reflection of your work's merit. The following week was a whirlwind. Nathan's office was cleared out over the weekend, and an internal announcement on Monday informed the company that he was no longer with Tech Fusion. Brian was reassigned to a different department, his brief moment in the spotlight over. The investigation into Nathan's activities revealed more than expected. He had indeed been planning to have key components of my system modified by Techno Solutions, with an arrangement that would have earned him a substantial consulting fee. This discovery led to his immediate termination and a referral to legal authorities for potential corporate espionage charges. Word spread quickly through industry channels, and Nathan found himself essentially blacklisted from similar positions at other companies. His carefully constructed career collapsed like a house of cards. Meanwhile, I was given a corner office and authority to rebuild my team. Diana returned to work with me, apologizing profusely for her silence during the difficult period. Jessica joined as data science lead, and Marcus agreed to delay his retirement to serve as architecture consultant. With renewed support and resources, we completed the system in record time. The presentation to Jacobson Manufacturing was a resounding success, resulting in a contract worth twice what Nathan had been projecting. Other clients soon followed, and the predictive maintenance system became Tech Fusion's fastest-growing product line. 3 months after the confrontation, Michael called me into his office for an unexpected meeting. Sarah Johnson and Victoria Andrews were also present. Stephanie Michael began. Your work has exceeded all expectations. We would like to offer you a promotion to Vice President of Innovation with a substantial equity package and increased team resources. The offer was generous, more than I had ever anticipated. But during the tumultuous recent months, my original dream of launching my own startup had crystallized into a clear vision. I am honored by the offer, I said carefully, but I would like to propose an alternative arrangement. They looked at me with curiosity as I outlined my counterproposal. I would establish my own company focused on advanced applications of the predictive algorithms I had developed, while licensing the core technology back to Tech Fusion for their manufacturing clients. This would allow Tech Fusion to maintain their momentum with existing clients while opening new markets through my startup. After initial surprise, a productive negotiation ensued. Tech Fusion would provide seed funding through a licensing deal plus introductions to Victoria's venture capital firm for additional investment. In return, they would receive preferential licensing terms and a minority stake in my new company. By the end of the day, we had the framework of an agreement that would transform my career in ways I had only dreamed of. As I left Michael's office, Allison was waiting in the hallway with a knowing smile. Congratulations, startup founder, she said. I knew that clause would protect you, but I never imagined it would launch your company. I hugged her impulsively. Thank you for believing in me, and for standing up in that boardroom. That is what friends do, she replied simply. And perhaps what future legal counsel for promising startups do as well. I laughed. You are at the top of my list when we need legal representation. As I walked out of the building that evening, I felt a profound sense of vindication and excitement. What Nathan had intended as my professional demotion had instead become the catalyst for my greatest opportunity. 1 year later, I stood in the sleek offices of Predictive Innovations, the company I had founded after leaving Tech Fusion. The open concept workspace buzzed with the energy of 20 employees collaborating on various projects. Jessica had joined as my chief data officer, and Diana was thriving as our lead user experience designer. Our company culture was built on the lessons I had learned during the Nathan debacle. Transparency was our core value, with all team members having access to project documentation and strategic plans. We instituted a rigorous system of proper attribution, ensuring that every contributor's work was recognized and respected. Our code of conduct explicitly prohibited taking credit for others' ideas, and our hiring process screened for collaboration skills as much as technical abilities. We had secured 2 rounds of funding, with Victoria Andrews's firm leading the latest investment that valued our company at $20 million. The licensing agreement with TechFusion continued to provide a steady revenue stream while we expanded into new markets like healthcare and energy management. As I walked through the office checking in on various teams, my assistant informed me that someone was waiting to see me in the reception area. To my surprise, it was Brian Thompson. He looked different from when I had last seen him at TechFusion. His expensive suit replaced by casual attire, his confident posture now hesitant. I invited him into my office, curious about this unexpected visit. "I've been trying to find a new position for months," Brian admitted after we exchanged awkward greetings. "But the Nathan scandal has followed me. Everyone assumes I was complicit in his plans." I felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication that justice had been served, but also a twinge of sympathy for someone caught in the crossfire of corporate politics. "Were you," I asked directly, "complicit, I mean?" Brian looked down at his hands. "Not initially. I just thought Nathan was mentoring me. By the time I realized what was really happening with your code, I was too afraid for my own position to speak up. It was cowardly." His honesty was unexpected and somewhat disarming. "What do you want from me, Brian?" "A chance," he said simply. "Not necessarily at your company, though. I would be grateful for that. But maybe a reference or advice on how to move forward. I made a mistake by staying silent, but I want to learn from it." After a thoughtful conversation, I did not offer Brian a job, but I did agree to introduce him to a former colleague who ran a coding boot camp and was always looking for teaching assistants with real-world experience, including lessons learned the hard way. It was a small gesture that cost me little but might help someone rebuild their career based on better principles. As Brian left, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain and betrayal of watching Nathan dismantle my project had been transformative, forcing me to stand up for myself in ways I might never have otherwise. The healing process had not been instant. For months after leaving TechFusion, I had struggled with trust issues, second-guessing potential partners and investors. But gradually, through building my own company culture based on values I believed in, I had found a new confidence and sense of purpose. My friendship with Allison had deepened, with her firm now handling all our legal work. Marcus had become a valued advisor to my company, sharing his decades of wisdom with our young team. Even Michael from TechFusion occasionally called to check in and share industry insights. The experience had taught me a profound lesson about professional self-advocacy. Documenting my work and understanding the legal aspects of my code had not been paranoia but prudent self-protection. In a world where ideas are currency, protecting your intellectual contributions is not selfish, it is necessary. I had also learned that standing up for yourself professionally does not require becoming bitter or vengeful. My goal had never been to destroy Nathan, but to protect what I had built and ensure it was used ethically. His downfall was the result of his own actions, not my desire for revenge. The most unexpected outcome was the freedom I had found. Running my own company according to my values was more fulfilling than I could have imagined. The betrayal that had seemed like a career-ending disaster had ultimately opened the door to my greatest professional achievement. That evening, as I prepared for a presentation at a major tech conference, I thought about all the other talented developers who might be facing similar situations. My story could serve as both a warning and an inspiration. Knowledge of your rights, meticulous documentation, and the courage to stand your ground were powerful tools in any professional's arsenal. Sometimes I realized the biggest opportunities in life come disguised as unfair setbacks. The clause I had buried in my code had not just been legal protection, it had been the foundation for an entirely new chapter in my career. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself professionally or protect your work from being misused? I would love to hear your stories in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences in the tech world. Remember, documenting your work is not just good practice. It could save your career someday. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that standing up for yourself professionally is not just okay, it is essential. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to protect your own work and talents.